Somewhere in Germany right now, there's a guy named Zoller who owns a hardware store, and he has no idea that his last name is one letter away from the family that gave the world Kaiser Wilhelm II, 3 kings of Prussia, and a castle so massive it gets 350,000 visitors a year. He just thinks it's a normal last name. That's the thing about German surnames. Most people walking around with them have no clue they're carrying 1,000 years of blood, war, and buried secrets in 4 or 5 syllables. Today I'm going to walk you through 10 of those surnames, and I promise you, by the time we get to number 7, you're going to be pausing this video to check your own family tree, because some of these names are way more common than you'd think, and the stories behind them are stranger than fiction, because they're not fiction. Real castles, real bones dug out of real crypts, real DNA tests that shocked historians, real feuds that split entire countries in half for 200 years. And one name on this list is connected to a king who drowned in 3 feet of water under circumstances nobody has ever fully explained. Stick around for that one. Let's get into it. Before we go further, if you're into hidden history like this, hit subscribe now, because I'm about to show you the one surname on this list that's connected to a murder mystery historians still haven't solved. Okay, let's start at the top. Number 1, Hohenzollern. If your last name is Zoller, Zollner, Zollernitz, or anything close to that, pay attention. In the year 1061, a monk named Berthold of Reichenau was writing down the events of his time in a monastery, and he mentioned a nobleman who'd just been killed in a blood feud. His name was Burkhard I, Count of Zollern. That single sentence, written by a monk almost 1,000 years ago, is the earliest hard proof we have that the Hohenzollern family existed at all. They took their name from a castle built on top of an 855-meter mountain in Swabia, in what's now Baden-Württemberg, southern Germany. And here's the part that should give you chills. Historians still don't know for certain who Burkhard's father was. There's a leading theory that a nobleman named Frederick of Sulichgau was his father, but it's never been proven. The origin of one of the most powerful families in European history is, to this day, an open historical question. From that foggy beginning, the family split into 2 branches. One stayed Catholic and ruled small territories in the south. The other went Protestant, married into money in Nuremberg, and eventually became the rulers of Brandenburg, then Prussia, then the entire German Empire. The last Hohenzollern Emperor, Wilhelm II, fled to the Netherlands after World War I and lived out his life as an exile, chopping wood on a Dutch estate, once the most powerful man on the continent, reduced to a man with an axe and a grudge. And here's a detail most people never hear. When the German monarchy collapsed in 1918 and Wilhelm fled, the family didn't just disappear into obscurity. They negotiated to keep enormous amounts of land, art, and property. And that negotiation is still legally contested today. As recently as the 2010s and 2020s, living Hohenzollern descendants were in active legal disputes with the German government over restitution claims tied to art collections and castles, arguing in court over property connected to decisions their ancestors made a century ago. A 1,000-year-old bloodline still showing up in modern courtrooms. If your name has Zoller buried in it anywhere, that's the bloodline you're brushing up against. Number 2, Welf. You might know this one better as Guelph. And this is where things get genuinely wild, because for centuries, the Welf family themselves claimed their ancestry went back to a Skirian prince named Edeko, who served directly under Attila the Hun, and to Edeko's son Odoacer, the man who became the first barbarian king of Italy after he deposed the last Roman emperor in the year 476. Now, modern historians are skeptical of that claim. Most believe it was a piece of medieval propaganda, a myth the family attached to themselves later, to sound more ancient and more terrifying than they actually were. What we do know for certain is that a Frankish nobleman named Ruthard, who died sometime before the year 790, is a much more likely real ancestor. But here's why this name matters so much. In the year 1140, at the Battle of Weinsberg, the name Welf was literally used as a war cry by one side of a German civil war, while their enemies shouted Weiblingen, the name of a rival castle. When Italian city-states heard about this feud, they turned those 2 words into Guelfo and Ghibellino, Guelph and Ghibelline, and that split didn't stay a German problem. It tore Italy apart for the next 200 years, city against city, family against family, all descending from a fight over one German surname. And the Welf bloodline didn't die out. It became the House of Hanover, which became the royal family of Great Britain in 1714, which means, technically, King Charles III of England carries this exact German surname in his ancestry. Number 3, Wittelsbach. This is the family that ruled Bavaria continuously from 1180 all the way until 1918, over 700 years without interruption, which made them one of the longest reigning dynasties in all of European history. Their original castle, also called Wittelsbach, was actually torn down centuries ago, and today almost nothing physically remains of it, just a modest memorial stone in a field near Aichach. Think about that. The family that built Neuschwanstein Castle, the fairy tale castle that literally inspired Disney's logo, started from a base so humble that it's now just grass and a plaque. The Wittelsbachs also gave us one of history's most tragic monarchs, King Ludwig II, the so-called Mad King, who bankrupted his own treasury building fantasy castles, and then died under deeply mysterious circumstances in Lake Starnberg in 1886, drowned in shallow water alongside his own psychiatrist. The official autopsy at the time claimed the cause of death was drowning, but multiple witnesses and later researchers pointed out the water where he was found was barely chest deep for a man his size, and no water was found in his lungs during the original examination, a detail that, if accurate, contradicts a simple drowning. In 2012, a team of forensic historians re-examined the surviving records and old photographs of Ludwig's coat and pointed to unexplained damage consistent with gunshots, reigniting a debate that's now well over a century old with still no universally accepted answer. To this day, historians argue over whether it was suicide, an accident, or something darker. If your surname is Wittelsbach, or even just from Bavaria with roots near Aichach, you are tied to that unsolved royal death. Number 4, Habsburg. Now, technically we associate this with Austria, but the name itself, the bloodline, is entirely German in origin, and the surname still exists among regular families in Germany and Switzerland today. The original castle wasn't in Austria at all. It was in modern-day Switzerland, in the canton of Aargau, and it was originally called Habsburg, which literally translates to Hawk's Castle, built around the year 1020. From that single hawk-themed fortress came a family that would eventually rule Austria, Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, and parts of the Americas, at one point controlling more territory than any family in human history up to that point. And here's a real documented scientific fact that sounds made up but isn't, because the Habsburgs married their own cousins so repeatedly to keep power concentrated. Their gene pool became so narrow that it produced a physical trait doctors now call the Habsburg jaw, a pronounced protruding lower jaw that shows up in portrait after portrait for 400 years. In 2019, a team of scientists actually published a genetic study analyzing portraits of Habsburg family members alongside their degree of inbreeding, and found a direct statistical correlation between how closely related the parents were and how severe that jaw deformity became in their children. That's not a legend. That's a peer-reviewed study connecting a surname to a physical trait you can trace in oil paintings hanging in museums right now. The most extreme case was the last Spanish Habsburg king, Charles II, who was so severely affected by generations of inbreeding that he could barely chew his own food, struggled to speak clearly, and died childless at 38. Ending the Spanish line of the family entirely and triggering a European-wide war over who would inherit his throne. Number 5, Wettin. This name comes from Wettin Castle on the banks of the Saale River in Saxony. The family rose to power controlling something incredibly valuable in medieval Europe, silver. In 1168, massive silver deposits were discovered in the Erzgebirge, literally translated as the Ore Mountains, right in Wettin territory. And that discovery is one of the primary reasons this family went from regional nobles to genuine European heavyweights almost overnight. In 1485, the family made a decision that reshaped German history. They split their territory between two brothers in what's called the Leipzig Partition, creating an Ernestine line and an Albertine line, and those two branches spent the next several centuries as rivals, sometimes literal enemies on opposite sides of wars, despite sharing the exact same surname and the exact same great-great-grandfather. One branch of this family eventually produced Prince Albert, the husband of Queen Victoria, which means the House of Windsor. The current British royal family was called the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha until World War I, when they changed the name specifically to hide their German Wettin roots from a British public that was busy fighting Germany. King George V reportedly chose the new name Windsor off the top of his head during a meeting, while his cousin, the German Kaiser, joked bitterly that he was going to the theater to see a play called The Merry Wives of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, a dark little joke about relatives on opposite sides of a world war sharing the exact same surname. Number 6. Hesse. If you paid attention in American history class, this name should ring a bell immediately. During the Revolutionary War, the British Crown didn't have enough soldiers of its own, so it paid the rulers of Hesse-Kassel, a German territory, to send roughly 19,000 soldiers to fight against the American colonists. Those soldiers were called Hessians, and they're the same troops George Washington famously caught off guard, half asleep after Christmas celebrations, during his crossing of the Delaware River in 1776. That entire pivotal moment in American history exists because of a business deal made by a family with the surname Hesse. The family's roots trace back to the medieval Landgraviate of Thuringia, and the Hesse line eventually connected by marriage into the British royal family as well. Prince Philip, husband of Queen Elizabeth II, actually had sisters who married into Hessian noble families, tying this German surname directly into the modern House of Windsor. Number 7. Oldenburg. This is a name a lot of people underestimate, because on paper the county of Oldenburg was small and honestly kind of unimpressive compared to Prussia or Bavaria. But through an absolutely remarkable string of strategic marriages starting in 1448, when Christian of Oldenburg was elected King of Denmark, this family's bloodline ended up ruling Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and eventually Russia. That's right, Russia. The Romanov dynasty that ruled Russia right up until the 1917 revolution and the execution of the entire family, including the famous Anastasia, was technically, by direct male line, part of the House of Oldenburg. Historians even refer to the actual reigning family as Holstein-Gottorp Romanov, because by blood, they were Oldenburg descendants who simply kept the Romanov name for political legitimacy. So, if your last name is Oldenburg, you're connected to a family whose bloodline sat on the thrones of at least 4 different countries, and whose Russian branch met one of the most infamous ends in modern royal history. Number 8. Nassau. The surname takes its name from a small castle above the town of Nassau on the Lahn River. And this is a family that turned political disaster into an entirely new nation. In the late 1500s, William of Orange, born into the House of Nassau, led the revolt of the Netherlands against Spanish Habsburg rule. And yes, that means 2 families on this exact list, Nassau and Habsburg, were literally at war with each other. William was assassinated in 1584, one of the first heads of state in history killed by a handgun, but his family's rebellion succeeded anyway, and the House of Orange-Nassau became, and still is today, the reigning royal family of the Netherlands. King Willem-Alexander, on the Dutch throne right now, carries this exact German surname. Quick thing before the last 2 names, because these final ones tie together in a way that's going to make the whole video click. If you want to keep seeing bloodlines like this get traced out, subscribe now, since I've still got a bonus story coming about a royal crypt that got opened decades after burial, and what forensic researchers found inside didn't fully match what the history books said. Number 9. Baden. Descended from the medieval house of Zeringen, this family ruled the Grand Duchy of Baden in southwestern Germany, and their territory sat right along the Rhine, making them a buffer and frequent battleground between French and German ambitions for centuries. One lesser-known but genuinely fascinating detail, the family's ancestral castle sat on a hill overlooking the spa town of Baden-Baden, which literally means bath, a town so associated with healing hot springs that Mark Twain visited and wrote about the mineral baths there in the 1870s. Members of the Baden family married into the Russian, Swedish, and Bavarian royal houses, spreading this surname's bloodline across the continent from mineral spas to imperial palaces. Number 10. Wurttemberg. Rulers of one of Germany's most historically significant kingdoms, and a surname with a genuinely surprising modern connection. One of Britain's earliest queens actually came from this house. Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz aside, it's Duke Philip of Wurttemberg's bloodline, through multiple intermarriages, that threads into nearly every royal house in Europe by the 1800s, because Wurttemberg, like most of the families on this list, played the same long game: marry strategically, expand quietly, survive by bloodline, even when the land itself gets lost. Today, descendants of the House of Wurttemberg still exist, and the family's former royal palace, the Residenzschloss in Stuttgart, still stands as one of the most visited landmarks in the region. Now, here's that bonus story I promised you. In 1991, East and West Germany had just reunified, and the German government made a decision that had been debated for years. They exhumed the remains of Frederick the Great, the most famous Hohenzollern king in Prussian history, who had died in 1786, and reburied him at Sanssouci Palace according to his own long-ignored wishes. But before that reburial, and in the decades since, historians and forensic researchers have gone back and forth over identification questions tied to remains in several Hohenzollern and Wettin family crypts, because centuries of wartime looting, hasty wartime relocations during the fall of Berlin in 1945, and incomplete record-keeping left real uncertainty about which bones belonged to which king. This isn't some conspiracy theory. It's an actual ongoing area of historical and archaeological research, because when armies are shelling a city, nobody's carefully labeling royal coffins on the way out. So even the physical, literal remains of the men who built these bloodlines have their own unsolved mysteries. So here's what all 10 of these names actually prove. A German surname isn't just a word your ancestor happened to be handed. Zollern, Welf, Wittelsbach, Habsburg, Wettin, Hesse, Oldenburg, Nassau, Baden, Wurttemberg. Every single one of these families started the exact same way every family starts. Somebody built a fortress on a hill, or got lucky with a marriage, or found silver in a mountain. And from that one decision, an entire chain of kings, wars, exiles, and mysteries unfolded across 1,000 years, all the way down to somebody scrolling through this video right now with one of these names sitting quietly in their family tree, never having known what it actually carries. That's the part that gets me every time I research these families. It's not ancient history locked away in a museum somewhere. It's still walking around in the modern world, sitting on European thrones, showing up in restitution lawsuits, and hiding quietly inside ordinary last names on driver's licenses and mailboxes across Germany, Austria, and beyond, right now, today. If you made it this far, you clearly love this kind of deep dive history, so subscribe before you go, because next time I'm covering the 10 surnames from a completely different European royal bloodline. And trust me, the story behind name number 4 on that list is even darker than anything you just heard. Thanks so much for watching all the way through, and I'll catch you in the very next one.